bon dia, assalamu alaikum, jambo, as they say in Tanzania, but also in Kenya. My name is Ibrahima Sheikh Diong, and as I said earlier, I'm a UN Assistant Secretary General and the Director General of African Risk Capacity. I've been informed that Madam President will come back at some point to greet the elders, the Council of the Wise, former heads of states of government of Africa, who have so much experience to share with us. I can tell you, having interacted with some of them, I've become much wiser before this session, and I have no doubt will benefit from the experience for having run a government in our country for a number of years. Welcome to the session on food security and nutrition security in Africa. We're going to delve into the leadership, the lessons learned. More importantly, what can we benefit from these lessons to make sure we can build a secure Africa when it comes to food. And I'm just seeing Madam President joining us to greet our elders before we get to our session. Madam President, welcome. Give a round of applause. So let's give a round of applause, Madam President, as she exits the room. At this junction, it is my distinguished honor to invite on stage former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, the chair of AGRF Partners Group, for his opening remarks. Mr. Prime Minister, you can give him a round of applause.
Excellencies, my fellow former heads of state and government, Excellencies, leaders in your distinguished capacities, I warmly welcome each of you as gathered today to address one of the most pressing challenges of our time, the interaction of food systems and climate change. It is an honor to convene this esteemed group whose collective wisdom and leadership have shaped the continent's political and economic agenda. The urgency of our discussion cannot be overstated. Our systems, which sustain our populations and economies, stand at a critical juncture. Simultaneously, the effects of climate change are increasingly evident and pose an existential threat to our planet and our people. These two issues are inextricably linked, and our moral and ethical duty is to act decisively. There is a South African proverb that says, I quote, "It is not the what, but the how that make or break you." End of quotation. And I do find myself reflecting heavily on the proverb based on my experience in my own country, Ethiopia. First, without political commitment, nothing was going to move. Secondly, our agriculture and food systems would not advance without people and communities at the center. Therefore, human capability and providing opportunities should come at the front. Finally, without adequate reasoning in research and resourcing in research, data, and finance, we would not be able to realize our vision for feeding and nourishing our people while providing sustainable livelihoods and watching over the environment. In essence, it's not the challenge of food security or climate change that will make or break us. It is how we respond and adopt to them nationally and collectively as an African continent. There are several mechanisms that we continue to use as a continent. The CAADP Malabo framework has served to bring focus on agri-food systems. However, as post-Malabo discussions is undertaking, we need to evaluate and update our framework to reflect the food systems transformation approach and focus on aligning our national development outcomes and climate targets to food systems action. I am confident that today's discussions and insights will inspire meaningful action and set a precedent for responsible governance and the stewardship of our continent and the planet. Together, we can chart a sustainable and resilient future for food systems and climate and humanity. So at this juncture, I would like to thank our heads of state and government present here today to guide the discussions and to give their wisdom how to go about in the future of our food and nutrition security. So Your Excellencies, thank you very much for coming and showing up in this very important session. And I thank you and God bless you.
Thank you very much, former Prime Minister. I'm Mr. Galanan, as they say in Ethiopia. And thank you for reminding us the importance of leadership and collaboration to get the food system and food security right. At this stage, before I bring in the former heads of state for a conversation which we hope to be lively, I'm going to invite on stage Dr. Ismail El-Wafi, who's the chief scientist at the FAO, just to frame our questions in 3 minutes before we have the conversation with our heads of state. Dr. El-Wafi.
Thank you very much, Ibrahima. Colleagues, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is big time for Africa awakening, for Africa renaissance. If we look to the continent, it can easily produce enough for its population and for export. To do so, we need very quickly to develop the whole value chain, the whole agri-food system within the continent. And we need to activate the African Continent Free Trade Agreement. And most importantly, really, it's to develop the agribusiness with African companies, with African SMEs. I want to just share with you a few numbers. 1 ton of wheat is $300. 1 ton of pasta is $3,000. So it's 10 times more for a very simple process. Let me give you another example, which is much bigger. 1 ton of carob seeds, it's $5,000. 1 ton of carob gum, which is the E410 that you find in all your agri-food, it's $200,000. So it's 40 times more. So that 130 billion per year for Africa food import can be very easily redirected to create our own add value, to create our own agribusiness, and to have the intra-trade between the different African countries. Science, technology, and innovation can bring to move forward to achieve the 2030 agenda in Africa and globally. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt that over the past years, we have witnessed unprecedented shocks and disruption around the world. The African continent is certainly not immune to them. In fact, this shock, particularly COVID-19, climate change, inflation, and the conflict, all of them have affected very much the world and Africa. FAO SOFI 2023 reports showed that between 691 and 783 million people face hunger in 2022 globally. What is shocking in this number, it's the number is growing instead of going down. But the other shocking is that we have about 122 million people that are hungry today versus 2019. So just in 2 years, we got 122 million more people that are hungry. and the hunger will continue to rise, particularly in some region and some sub-regions of Africa, in Western Asia, and in the Caribbean. So we must step up significantly our effort to fight hunger in Africa, where it is projected to be about 300 million hungry people in Africa by 2030. So as Mr. Chair of AGRA said, and ex-Prime Minister of Ethiopia, we are at a critical juncture. We are falling behind, and we need to speed up our investment, our impact, and our development efforts. And to do that, we can use science, technology, and innovation. As the chief scientist of FAO, I really believe that Africa needs today, more than anything else, technology and innovation. But of course, technology and innovation alone wouldn't make it. We need the right policies, we need the right regulatory framework, we need the right investment, and we need the right collaboration and partnership between the different stakeholders within the continent. And of course, working with the North is a must. It's not about taking out everything that the North is doing with the South, but rather developing the capacity from within. The number I gave you, instead of that add value going around the world to companies mostly from the North, it can be done with companies from Africa. So there is no time to lose. We have to act very fast. And this is where our strategic framework at FAO plays a role. The strategic framework from 22 to 31 talks about transforming agri-food system toward more efficiency, more resilience, more sustainability, and more inclusiveness. And the way we want to do it is through the four betters: a better production, a better nutrition, a better environment, and better life and livelihood for all, leaving no one behind. And if you think about it, those components on science, technology, and innovation, those components and investment on policies, and on coherence. The coherence is very much needed as we are talking about going forward. So a pleasure to be with the Council of the Wise. You as ex and previous prime ministers have lived through it. So I think it's very good to speak up and speak out and say it loud and make a difference from your new seats as the members of the Council of the Wise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our dear sister from Morocco, Shukran Jazilan. And thank you for framing the question about leadership, innovation, about legal regulatory framework, and all the stuff we'll be discussing with our former heads of state and government. At this juncture, it is my distinguished honor to welcome back on stage former Prime Minister of Ethiopia. Give a round of applause for Prime Minister. We are also delighted to have the former Prime Minister of Benin, His Excellency Lionel Diansu, to join us on stage, His Excellency. And last but not least, we have the former Prime Minister of Guinea, Mohamed Bouazizi, to join us on stage. Mr. Prime Minister, come and join on stage, please. We're going to frame our conversation in three parts. One is to start from the lessons you learned as former heads of government and former leaders in your countries. We're going to spend some time talking about collaboration, but also how you define a balance. Was that a priority in our countries? But let me start with the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia. Looking back at your time as a Prime Minister in your country at food security, if you could just share with us some of the lessons that you learned, given that all of you have to allocate budget and resources and set policies. Let me start from you and listen to your experience as Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, moderator. I think from my own experience, the first and most important thing is to change the mindset of our people, that they are able to produce, they are able to change the lives they are living in, and they have the potential to do that. And our main problem, compared with other continents in Africa, is the problem of human capability. And if we can address that human capability, starting from the mindset, and then giving technical and leadership know-how, leadership even in the household. I'm saying one single farming household needs leadership, and we have to start from there, where the family has to work together. You know, Africans, we work as a family. And we focused on family farm because usually women are neglected when the production system in our African farming is considered. But they are the most core of the production in our system. So we focused on the family, giving them the necessary skills, mindset, and also resources at the grassroots. We deployed more than 70,000 extension workers. In each village, 4 extension workers who are able to train, skill, and gives them demonstrations that can help them understand the new technologies and adaptation of that technology. That helped a lot. And the second one is, I said in my speech, people and communities at the center. You know, our lands are very much degraded in Ethiopia, especially in the northern part of Ethiopia. We were able in the last 10 years to reclaim and restore our land by soil and water conservation works that communities themselves were able to engage in and produce. I mean, you know, a simple example of bench terrace was able to reclaim the soil. The soil health is very important for us.
Right.
And by so doing, I think we were able to bring back streams and rivers, even the rivers back, which disappeared for so long period of time by just intervening into natural systems there.
Right.
So that has helped us with all the complication of climate change that our smallholder farmers can produce and produce at scale. And we made also a consolidation. We call it commercial agricultural commercialization cluster. As you can see recently, that the wheat production in our country has gone very much well. With this only, Ethiopia was able to be standing high at even maize production. Our productivity, average productivity has gone to 4.3 tons per hectare. In a farming, it's not easy to achieve that amount. And our wheat production has gone to 3.5 tons per hectare. And I think this all achievement has come because we put our people at the center.
Right.
And our youth and women at the center of this production system. I think that's what I can share.
Excellent. So innovation, change of mindset, put women at the center, community-driven inclusiveness. These are great lessons. We're going to move away from Ethiopia to another country, equally important, in Benin. Mr. Prime Minister, turn over to you. Again, the same questions. Looking back at your time as Prime Minister, what are some of the lessons that we learned in this food security before we move on to Guinea as well? Mr. Prime Minister.
Yes, thank you. Bonjour à tous. Maybe 2-3 mots en français parce que
On peut passer de l'anglais au français si vous le désirez, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
l'Afrique parle aussi un peu français. I've been a banker before becoming a prime minister. Then I've been a banker after having been prime minister. And I will concur with the chairman. Leadership is essential. Mindset is important. And I think that the African leadership is more and more committed and fully aware. And after COVID, plus food price inflation, Ukraine war, it's even quite clear that we have as a continent to safeguard and build our resilience because we receive exogenous shocks. And we cannot just rely on the rest of the world. And what is fascinating in Agra is that it is the way, the field, where the house, where you can build together, where you can exchange, where you can use African solutions to African problems, compare and build common strategies and best practices. And I think it's very important because it will be a self-effort if we want to safeguard some food security given the challenges and all those shocks coming from elsewhere, essentially. We are for nothing in the climate change impact on Africa, which is the worst in the world, probably, the most immediate. I mean, if Africa was the model in the world will be colder and colder and not warmer, and we would not be impacted. So we receive those shocks, and we have commonly to act. But as a banker, I have the feeling that we have to be serving our farmers, and as members of governments, help them to, and not inhibit them. Because sometimes when I see the legal framework, I think we have a lot of work a lot of things to perform and succeed in. We are not good in terms of ownership of land, of women, for instance, in many countries or in many provinces of my country. That could have been treated before. It's urgent to make sure that we create the proper legal framework. And we know from sister countries how to act, but we have to implement that. Another example, we have been inspired in the Federal Republic of Nigeria, our immense neighbor, under President Goodluck Jonathan's mandate, by the efficiency, the renewed efficiency of subsidies for inputs, for seeds, for the farmers to buy seeds and inputs, using market tools and through digital money, spreading vouchers in order for the farmers to be able themselves to choose the timing when they want to use this subsidy, and the supplier, and the quality, because not one size fits all, and so on. And we found in 2 years how much this unlocked efficiency. So now we are inspired in that. We have a president in Benin who is a specialist of fertilizers. He has built his personal private business in fertilizers. I don't know if it's the reason why, since I've left the government, the progress has been so quick, but in effect, Benin has doubled the output of cotton, maize, and cassava in 6 years. So, but a lot with the state, considering that it has to make people freer and using the market. And last thing, in terms of industrial policy and logistics, everything which is not purely in agriculture itself upstream, but downstream, has been put in place. In 3 years from now, it will be prohibited to export soy and cassava in raw form. It will have to be transformed and manufactured. And what we are observing as we speak with the first factories in place is that when you have a full value chain and when you have secured the off-takers, the yield through mid-long-term contracts of the small farmers are completely unlocked. And you see cassava from 8 tons by hectare to 40 tons by hectare because it is safe, it's long-term, off-taking has been secured. The same people on the same land with a bit of support, obviously, and logistical support in order to reduce the losses, les pertes au bord du champ. And we are very confident that the same people will unlock with trade, with proper supply chain, and a more efficient government administration using the market tools. We are very, very optimistic on safeguarding food security.
I have the most difficult task is to be polite vis-a-vis former heads of state and government and not to interrupt them. But I think you underscore 2 points that are equally important. That's leadership, as you said earlier, but also market-driven policies, which will delve a little bit more into the solutions. I'm going to move away from Benin to Guinea. For your information, the former Prime Minister of Guinea was the Director General of the organization I'm running today. So I replaced him at the African Vice capacity just because of that. Give a big round of applause. And former Prime Minister, I'm going to switch gear a little bit and get into a topic which I know is dear to you. And that is, if you look at the sector within Africa, there's so many different players, so many actors, both national and domestically, and often lead to chaos, a lack of coordination. How do we make sure the interest of our country is actually kept while we welcome global partners, African partners, so we don't actually duplicate efforts and waste time? So maybe address the issue about partnership and collaboration. What does it take to get it right?
Thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you very much for your kind words. Ibrahim, that's where leadership comes in.
Right.
If we want to succeed, we must have the right leadership. We must have the right leadership that devises the right strategies and the right policies. It is not for somebody to come in the country and decide that this is the way you are going to do your agriculture or this is the way you are going to finance it. It is for the country to design its own strategy, its own plan, to create the boxes and to ask people who want to collaborate to go into those boxes. It is the only way you can coordinate. There is sometimes countries, unfortunately, who become victim of goodwill. You know, people go to support the areas they are interested in. Some will look only at fertilizer, some will look only at seeds, and sometimes is not only for the benefit of the country. So therefore, it is extremely important that the strategies and the policies be defined by the leadership in the country. That's extremely important. Secondly, it is important that the local factor be taken into consideration. Some countries, I give a simple example, will need to promote drought-tolerant seeds, but some other countries are looking for seeds that resist to flood. So local context is extremely important. Also, there are countries like mine where you don't have a farmer who has more than 100 hectares in the whole country. So you don't have big agriculture landowners. So in addition to the fact that most of the population live in rural area, but you don't have that big agriculture proprietaire, terrien. It doesn't exist. So this is also part of the context. So therefore, your policies have to be geared towards what you have in reality on the ground. Smallholder agriculture is the direction for my country. When I came in a context of crisis. October, the next agricultural season is May, June. You know my pedigree is 30 years of agricultural development, IFAD, FAO, etc. So of course my thinking will be always agriculture. So the first thing was, let me think about the agricultural season. And we started looking what is missing. We import 500,000 tons of rice. okay, rice eaters, morning, noon, evening. Not cassava even, it's rice, basically. So you have to prepare. What do you need? A land that works, that is conducive to producing better yields. Constraint in terms of land tenure, yes, there, but not too much. The problem is making the land produce better, land productive. So so fertilizer, advisory, good seeds, but also small tweakings. Very simple. And this is I learned from my experience in the past. You can try, take a rice producing area, put small rice mills. I promise you, the next season, your rice production will grow at least by 20%. Right. So, for a country that is in crisis and transition, this is the kind of solution we brought in just to respond. The other aspect is financing. We may come to that discussion later, but you need to make sure that there is resources for people to have access to all those things. Right. But one most important thing, because we are speaking about climate, in my region, people burn and farm. Every year you have new forest you destroy and then you farm. So the only way you can combat that is to mechanize agriculture. To allow people, even if they have only 5 hectares, allow people to have access to plowing through mechanization. Right. So we created mechanization brigade built on the basis of private sector. Loan to young farmers, young engineers coming from school, don't have work, jobs, encourage them, build and set up mechanization brigades, but private, completely private, on loan by the government and pay. So by selling those services, we could start stabilizing people, not to burn and slash, as they call it, I think, in English, but repeat to the same place. If you add to that feeds, seeds and fertilizer, production went up. And you may have heard that this year, Guinea is the second producer of rice in West Africa. And this is a very, very big jump from where they were before. Just an example. Thank you.
All right. Well, you brought up another point equally important, that's local content. The only way we can actually get it right and make sure that there is a local content so we can think about local solution. I'm going to pick up what you said about resources and go back to the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia. And that is to say, I'm sure as a former Prime Minister, you have so many competing needs to put resources into and attention and focus, and it's not just agriculture. I wonder if you could just share your experience. How do you find the balance between allocating resources to the energy sector, to education, and to food security? And how did you manage actually to do that? I think we'd like to hear your insights. That balance is extremely important.
I think when we come to resource allocation in agriculture, we all doesn't mean that it's only on the production. Right. We said agriculture is the whole value chain and the whole food system. So it means it also includes rural roads. It also includes health services because a farmer which is infested by malaria cannot produce. So to me, agriculture is all that. But even with that, we have a continental target by the Malabo Declaration, the CADIP targets. One of it is you have to allocate in the agriculture sector, not other sectors, at least 10% of the annual budget. You know, the budget we allocated in Ethiopia was 17% of the annual budget, which is much more bigger than 10%, the minimum. So that exemplary allocation was much more revolutionized our agriculture. We usually seek something from outside. I think one of the mindsets we have to look into is we have to prioritize in areas where we have to put our money the most. So yes, education, health, infrastructure, all are necessary. But agriculture itself is the basics for all. So we allocated 17% of our budget on average into agriculture. Next, I think we do have a number of big microfinance institutions that are created by the people themselves. And we also try to de-risk the private sector to get into financing this agricultural production. So that is the example which Ethiopia has stood the first, by the way, in the Malabo target by allocating 17%. Most countries are below 10% of their budget.
Right. Well, Mr. Prime Minister, since you have the microphone, just in 30 seconds, because we need to wrap up, if you want us to take away something from this conversation, in 30 seconds, what would it be? What would be your message on food security for Africa?
I think we Africans, we can change things. We have that capacity. We have the young population we have the land resources we have educated scientists. The only thing is our mindset. We have to change that.
All right, and the former Prime Minister from Benin, in a few seconds, what would be the takeaway message from this conversation?
I would build on what the chairman said in terms of allocation of financial resources through the budget, through the microfinance institutions, which are maybe one of the most useful inventions for agriculture, given what is the banking system. I would add another indicator in the allocation of credit by the banking system, how it evolves. The first day I was Prime Minister, discussing with the central banker, I asked, what is the allocation by the private sector, by the private and public banking sector? 2% for agriculture, which is 27% of the GDP, 2%. Following how, by de-risking, by insuring, agriculture today has a lot of shocks because of climate change, yet it remains insurable. But insurance has not penetrated our agriculture yet. That the government can push. Insure, de-risk, for the ratio of credit be in a situation to go from 2 to 20%. It is essential because agriculture is very capital intensive. I have a farm. I've decided for my 70th anniversary to become a young farmer. I have a farm. The problem is that the equipment of my farm is 3 years of output of my farm, which is capital intensity. And it's true if you have 2 hectares or 100 hectares. It is capital intensive. We cannot consider allocation of credit and equity as marginal. It is central.
Thank you. Former Prime Minister of Guinea, in 30 seconds, what would be the takeaway message from this conversation?
Number one, I want us to really make sure that agriculture is local. You need solutions that are local. And you must adapt your policies, your strategies each time, at each place in a different way. Secondly, I want to add to this, and you understand that very well, that we need to build the resilience of the farmers. And that resilience, one of the best way, of course, diversification is another one, but is insurance. Right. Because weather, unfortunately, our capability to predict what may happen tomorrow is still limited. We don't have that science to the detail. So, and 2 levels. 1, farm protection, crop. 2, disaster risk management. Right. We have millions of resources out there that can be properly used for that. Right. But specifically, when you have in front of you 70% of your food produced by someone, you need to take care of him. And in Africa, that is the case is smallholder farmers. And this is why institutions like IFAD and others are trying to work on. And I think we should concentrate on that. You should build on that.
Right.
Just one thing.
Right.
Remember, look at agricultural history. Every country, most of the countries that went fast in agriculture, built it,
Right.
went fast on development, overall development, started with agriculture. 5-7% growth over the years, you have a base, and then you jump.
Right.
Look at India as an example, look at Vietnam, look at others, and that is the way to go.
Right.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the wise people have spoken, and they've said something extremely powerful. One, we need to change the mindset, the way we look at agriculture in our country as a business, as opposed to something you do afterthought, so we can actually be part of the solution. Number two, our banking system, the credit that we offer for those who want to get into agriculture, has to work for the sector. We need to innovate and look at banking sectors. And last but not least, we need to build resilience as we protect the most vulnerable people who are affected by climate change. So on that note, give a round of applause to our former heads of government. So thank you very much. Now, I'd like to invite on stage the next moderator for another conversation with other heads of government and state. So give a round of applause as she comes on stage, my dear sister here.
I would like to invite on stage Excellency Dr. Jakaya Kikwete, former President of Tanzania. Please join us on stage. Excellency Jonathan Goodluck, former President of Nigeria. His Excellency Dr. Ibrahim Asane Migaki, currently the AU Special Envoy for Food Systems, but former Prime Minister of Niger. Please join us on stage. My name is Lindiwe Majele Sibanda. I'm currently the System Board Chair for CGIAR. I'm a Zimbabwean, I'm a farmer, I'm a scientist, but my shoe is always pinching, and where it pinches the most is on policy. We create technologies so that they are taken up by the people we love and serve the most, our smallholder farmers. But most of the time, we don't have a conducive policy environment. You have been the architects. Take us back memory lane. What's your legacy? What is the one policy, instrument, or innovative strategy that you, during your tenure, put in place that was a game changer in making sure that we face climate change and that you move the needle when it comes to food security in your country? Let me start with you, President Jakaya Kikwete. We've been there, we are here. Take us there. What did you do?
One,
One,
only one.
game changer.
Of course, during my presidency, I gave a lot of focus on agriculture, really because of the reality on the ground. First, of course, agriculture employs, or we have almost 70 to 75% of our people live in rural areas, and they depend on agriculture for their livelihood. But the agriculture they depend on is backward agriculture. Low productivity, low production. So really the question is, how do we transform our agriculture, make it more productive so that there is more production, people's incomes increase, we are assured the country of food security. This has been the main question. Of course, what we started working on has been coming up with the Agricultural Sector Development Program, ASDP. It was meant to address the main constraints to agricultural transformation and agricultural growth in the country.
because we have very short time, I cannot go into the details. This is one of the overarching instruments. And I'm glad now the government is working on ASDP 2. Focus is, what are the main constraints? One, irrigation, seeds, fertilizers, herbicides and pesticides, imparting skills to farmers, looking at the infrastructure to support the agricultural sector, look at financing aspect to support farmers, look at the crop marketing systems, which have also been another program. But of course, in the budget for ASDP, over 60% of it is money dedicated to irrigation. And then, of course, we, as we proceeded, we came to realize that there is little involvement of the private sector in the transformation of Tanzania's agriculture. As president, I've been chairing what we call the Tanzania Business Council. In one of the meetings of the Tanzania Business Council, we discussed with the private sector, what do we do to our agriculture? And all of us agreed. That's how we came up with the phrase, Kilimo Kwanza.
Yeah.
That agriculture first. All of us. But now we needed to involve the private sector more into the production, but also into the processing, but also into buying from the farmers, and so on and so forth. So we are now completing the value chain. But then we came with the whole issue of food security. We have, fortunately in Tanzania, at that time, 4 regions. Later, of course, I made them 6. 4 regions of Iringa, Mbeya, Ruvuma, and Rukwa. These are the food basket. These are the regions where we get all the maize and the rice we consume in the country. So we said, let's put our hand where our mouth is. Special focus to this. That's how we came up with the Southern Agricultural Growth Corridor of Tanzania, SAGCOT. Of course, a major component here has been support farmers, and when we talk about farmers, is smallholder farmers, because when we came up with SAGCOT, there's been a lot of misinformation, disinformation, that now is going to be land grabbing. You read in the media, the BBC, CNN, or New York Times. Well, it was a total misconception. We were really talking about how to help the smallholder farmer transform its agriculture from subsistence to a thriving business. So that's how we started with SAGCOT. We brought in also, through Kilimo Kwanza, we also involved the private sector. But the aspect of the private sector has been, let there be large-scale farmers, but with smallholder outgrowers. The large-scale farmer supporting the smallholder farmer with the necessary inputs, the technology, the technical assistance, so as to increase productivity. Of course, climate change is a factor. I can say it's real. These days, rainfall is not reliable. When I was growing up, it was by, you know it, that the 15th of March, rains are going to start. The 30th of May, the long rains are going to end. 15th of October, the short rains will start. Mid-December, the rains are going to start. And these days, that is not the case. 3 years ago, I plowed 40 acres. I'm a smallholder farmer.
They don't believe that.
Huh? No, why? Not because I'm president. It is true I'm a smallholder farmer. I don't have a farm of 500 acres, no. I plowed 40 acres. The rains did not come. I did not plant. And then came the next season. I planted 20 acres, plowed 20 acres. The rains also did not come. In fact, I bought seeds from Bero Agro. I bought fertilizers, ready. We started arguing with my people assisting me in the farm. Let's plant. I said, don't plant. Let's plant, don't. I said, okay, fine. Let's go continue. Plant only 5 acres. We planted 5 acres. The rains came late. The maize crop got this level. The rains disappeared, and I lost everything. So climate change is real. We have to invest in research so as to get drought-resistant crops, resistant to pests and diseases. This is what we have done. We invested a lot on research. For the first time, this I'm going to conclude. For the first time, I made it mandatory that we set 1% of the national budget for research. And we spent a lot of this money in agricultural research. Because in the past, the government was not investing on research. It was the donors who were investing on research, and the donors had their own programs of interest, not our programs.
Thank you.
So it is now moving ahead. I think we are seeing some of the results of that.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for taking us to your small farm, bringing to life the risks you are facing. 15 March is gone. 15 October is gone. Climate change is real. But your legacy lives on. Mr. Kilimo Kwanza, Mr. Sagod, Mr. 1% budget for research. Thank you very much. Let's move now to Nigeria. I did say it's hard talk. We've just got 15 minutes. 8 has been taken up. In just 5 minutes exactly. Excellency, Jonathan Goodluck, what did you do? What's your legacy? You're going to be Mr. Who when it comes to food systems and climate resilience?
Thank you so much. It's so difficult to really convey to you what we did in that short time. But let me start by saying, just like the previous panel emphasized on the issue of leadership, especially the former Prime Minister of Guinea said so, I really wanted to revolutionize agriculture in Nigeria. So when I was elected as a president, I decided to look for one of the best in the country, not based on members of my political party. I decided to look for a young, aggressive, innovative, and creative man to drive agriculture. And I got one, Dr. Adesina, who is currently the president of African Development Bank. I did not know him. He was not a member of my party, was not even in the country during the elections. But I wanted the best, and we have no regrets. And that is what I will advise my colleagues who are in offices. If you want to change agriculture, look for a competent person. Through him, we launched what we call Agri Transformation Agenda, ATA. Under that, we did a number of things. But let me quickly mention the GESS program, the Growth Enhancement Support System. In that program, there are quite a number of things, but what I will highlight here is what we call the e-wallet. Before we launched this, Nigeria government, both federal and state governments, sent fertilizers and other agro-input seeds, agrochemicals and others to farmers, but hardly get. People divert it through one means or the other. In some cases, fertilizers are even adulterated with sand. So we decided to launch the e-wallet system to make sure that whether in terms of finance, improved seeds, agrochemicals and others, gets directly to the farmers. And that was very, very progressive approach. In fact, we launched it in April 2012. By September 2012, 14.3 million farmers keyed into the project. And in fact, after us, that was the first time it was introduced in Africa, but the World Bank escalated it to some African countries, including Asian countries. Because of that aggressive approach, in terms of even financing, we introduced what we call risk. Just to summarize, we share risk with the farmers. Both the government, the central bank share risk with farmers. So banks were able to give more credits to farmers. And of course, we encourage the private sector to get involved in the agricultural value chain. Along that line, there was so much improvement that even in terms of the bank books, before that time, you have only about 0.07% of bank books that lend to agriculture. We improved it by up to 5%. And agri became a key thing because we now changed the tone that agri is not to be pursued as just a rural development program, but a wealth creation program. And therefore, agri must be managed as a business. And so many young people who read engineering, medicine, law, also establishing farms in Nigeria then, through the programs we call agropreneurs. Through that, we were able to improve the food production. And from that 2012 to 2014, the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Food Program awarded Nigeria and recognized us for reducing poverty, people who are living very poor people to 50% based on the MDG Goal 1, and that award was given to us in Rome. So the key thing about agri is innovation, and you must get somebody who's passionate to drive the process. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Lessons from Nigeria. His Excellency said, number one, get the right person. I was going to say man for the job, and none other than Adesina Akin was the driver. Get the inputs right. Use e-wallets and get the banks and private sector on board. Then it happened. That's your legacy, Excellency. Thank you very much. Dr. Meaki, you're still running in the treadmill. You're a big ambassador. You've been with AU NEPAD. You've been Prime Minister. We've only got 4 minutes. Take us forward. Reflect. We've had Tanzania, legacy lives on. We've had Nigeria, legacy lives on. But you still can influence. 1 minute backward, one thing you did, but 1 minute, what would you do differently now?
Okay, no, thank you. First of all, the presentation by Their Excellencies, the two presidents, showed how political determination is fundamental. So I will allude to 3 points. And political determination leads to results. So there's a link which is very, very important there. 3 points. The first one, during my tenure as Prime Minister, one thing what we did was to locate institutionally the the National Adaptation Plan at the Prime Minister's office, so that it could supervise what the other ministries were doing in terms of climate issues. I think the institutional localization is important at the highest level. Now, the second point, which was equally mentioned before, and Prime Minister Haile Mariam mentioned it very well, it's not the what, it's the how which breaks. The what, we could fill this room with all the technical solutions that exist regarding irrigation, regarding quality of inputs, regarding fertilizers, regarding credit mechanism, regarding insurance. We know all the technical solutions. The question is, what are the political solutions which were mentioned here that can help implement the technical solutions? That's really the domain. And in that sense, I think integration is very important. And climate smart agriculture, we're discussing about it, is about managing the interlinkages between food security and climate change. So that has to be solved institutionally, because we are not framed institutionally to tackle multisectorality and interlinkages. So that's, and my last point, it's an important point. And my last point will be about the way policies in the future need to be designed. You know, we are in a continent where 75% of the population is under 25. Median age is 19. Europe is 40 years plus. You cannot say to a young African, look, we intend to attain this objective in 2050, 2030. He wants the results tomorrow. So the best way to really get him on board and have stability in terms of governance is to make them part of the creation of a solution. So co-creating the solution, co-creating the policies with the youth is important. And in the youth, evidently, you have women, which is, we say women and youth, but it's the concept I want to highlight is co-creating with them. Thank you.
Excellent. What we are hearing is freshness. We've done it in Tanzania, we've done it in Nigeria, we've done it in Niger, but for us as CGIAR, we also realize that leadership is key, and I want to also applaud the new appointment of Dr. Ismahan Elufe, who is taking over as the CEO, the Managing Director of One CGIAR across all our centers starting 1 December. So Africa is ready for business. Thank you very much. Thank you.